Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BT's Fly Tying Friday. Tonight, the 13th of December, 2024, we've got Mike Kelly, and he's going to be talking to us about damselflies. He'll also continue into the weekly tip with some waiting on flies. And we'll probably add a little something ourselves on that weekly tip when we get to that point. But for now, we'd like to introduce you to our buddy. That's Mike Kelly. He grew up in Nebraska and retired from the Air Force as a radar technician and instructor. He returned to Nebraska and now works at U.S. Strategic Command in Omaha. Mike has been tying flies for about 39 years. He's an assistant program lead for Project Healing Waters in Omaha, where he does weekly pattern demonstrations and teaches fly tying classes. Please join us in welcoming La Vista, Nebraska fly tyer, Mike Kelly. Mike, it's all yours.
Thanks, Al. Um, so I'm going to start off with a little information about damselflies in case you're not familiar with them. So damselflies are similar to dragonflies, but they have smaller and slimmer bodies. And the adults normally have their wings folded along the body as opposed to dragonflies where the wings are flat and away from the body. They like still or slow water that's clean and well oxygenated. The adult males are iridescent blue, green, red, or purple, when the females are shades of like olive or brown. Their life cycle is egg, nymph, and adult, and once hatched, both stages feed on other insects. Adults pick midges and other small insects off stems and leaves with their spiny legs. This stage is normally 2 to 6 weeks, the adult stage. Although you'll see a few dry damselfly patterns out there, they're really not that vulnerable in the adult stage. Then they lay their eggs in plant material on the along the water line. And this could be at the shoreline or on the edges of lily pads, cattails, or rushes. And then the eggs hatch into nymphs and hide among the nymphs hide among the submerged vegetation in like 2 to 25 feet of water. The nymphs are usually ½ inch to 1.5 inches, and their color usually matches the weeds or debris that they hide in. At the end of their abdomen are 3 paddle-shaped gill structures for oxygen intake. A healthy pond can actually hold hundreds of damselfly nymphs in a square yard. Although they're mostly hidden in the vegetation in this stage, they do travel, and fish will often cruise the shallow weed edges looking for these immature nymphs. They feed on small aquatic insects and worms, and they can eat up to 100 mosquito larvae and midge larvae every day. They molt about 12 times over 2 to 3 years. And in the later stages, the wing pads become more swollen and visible. There's a video of one swimming. In the summer, as the water warms, the mature nymphs rise toward the surface at about a 20-degree angle, and then they level off at about 1 to 3 feet below the surface. And they swim toward shore by wagging their abdomen. This 2 to 3 week window is the most vulnerable stage and the best time to fish damselfly nymphs. You can find evidence of this hatch activity by looking along the shore for spent shucks clinging to cattail stems or other vegetation. If you're in a boat, a lot of times you pull up the anchor rope and there's some clinging to the anchor rope, thinking that it's a weed. You would fish this nymph stage with a long cast and then do it like a hand twist retrieve, and then do like 3 to 5 second pauses. But the rest of the year outside of that window of when they're swimming like that, it's best to imitate the more juvenile stages and fish damsel nymphs deeper, like under an indicator that's pegged so the fly is just off the bottom. And once they reach the vegetation, they climb above the surface and they change into the winged adults. They continue to eat midges and mosquitoes above the surface of the water through the summer and fall, and then they mate and they die with the first frost. So like a mayfly spinner fall, this can be another vulnerable stage in their life cycle. So that's when some of the adult damsel fly imitations could actually do pretty good. For the first fly, this is Rob Snow White's damselfly nymph. It's a good guide fly, very easy to tie and very few materials. Normally size 10 to 12. The thread is red. The tail is ostrich herl and crystal flash. The body is that same ostrich herl, and then the eyes are bead chain or mono. The head is the red thread that you use in tying this. So here I used a mono eye that I colored with a Sharpie. So Rob Snow White normally ties these in chartreuse. That's the only color he ties them in. So I have some, you want pretty long fibers on this ostrich herl, pretty long herls. And then there's 3 strands of crystal flash. And I like to use this midge flash. I also have it in a good color for this. Red thread, and I'm using this is a Daiichi 1150. I'm going to do it in a size 10. And then I'm going to use these Wapsi preformed dumbbell eyes. They're plastic eyes. So I'm going to select 3 of these with pretty good tips on them. So I'll grab about 5 and then make sure I've got 3 good ones here. Set those by the vise. And I already selected a hook and dumbbell eyes, and I'll move the thread and the crystal flash over. So this uses a like a scud hook, curved hook like this. So I'm going to start just by starting my thread to about halfway, and then I'm going to attach the eyes. You can use, of course, bead chain. That's what he uses. I don't have bead chain in the proper size. So I like to go about an eye length back for placement of these eyes. So the thing with these plastic eyes is you don't want to put too much pressure because you can actually break that plastic. Then I'm going to put in 3 strands of this crystal flash. Again, this is the midge version. Set those aside for another one. Now, I'll grab these peacock curls and even up the tips. Bring it down here.
Mike, you said peacock. Is that a peacock or ostrich?
I'm sorry, ostrich. I do that all the time. Ostrich herl. And it helps if you can wet it. So again, I have a wet paper towel here. And I'll wet it to keep it under control a little bit. And then come forward. To the front, and then I'll just take these ostrich herls and wrap them forward. to the front, come under the eyes and around to the back. And then right behind the eyes, I'll do 2 turns, maybe 3, and then bring it around to the eye of the hook. Cut that loose. And then whip finish. Like I said, this is a good, get control of my whip finish here. This is a good guide fly. You can crank a bunch of these out. And then if you're like me and you lose them in the trees or the vegetation, sometimes you don't have to worry about it because you don't have a lot invested in. But weaving that through the eyes like that makes it nice around the eyes. So that's Rob Snow White's damsel nymph. I guess he does a lot of the shows back east. I don't think he does any of the Western fly fishing shows. Is there any questions on that one? If not, I'll go ahead to, this is actually one of my very favorites. This is Brian Chan's mature damsel nymph. For this one, the hook is normally I like to use a 3X long, again, size 10. The thread is olive. The body and thorax is olive marabou or whatever color you choose. You could do it in chartreuse, tan color, brown, but most of the time they seem to be like an olive color. That's the way I like to tie these. The rib is copper wire. The legs and shell back will be pheasant tail. And the eyes again are bead chain or mono. So it's best to use on a lot of these flies, it's best to use just a strung marabou. The woolly bugger marabou tends to be too short on the fibers. And you need these to be nice and long. There's ways to get around it if you don't have real long marabou. But I'll go ahead and pull one of these out that's longer, set it over here. Got 2 of them actually. And then the pheasant tail, the copper wire, and then I'll be using olive thread. I'll do this in a size 8. Again, this is a 3X long hook. I'm using this Semperfli Nano Silk. It's just what I had loaded in olive. So I'm going to wax the thread just to make it tacky enough to get a good thread base. So on this one, I'm not going to actually tie in the eyes until later in the fly. I'll do a thread base back to the end of the shank right there. And then I'll come back forward to tie that off. About right here. So I'm going to take about a good ½ inch of this marabou and just strip it off the rachis. And I'm going to get rid of those curly butt ends there because they tend to grab onto stuff and cause trouble. So I want this tail to be about He says 3/4 of the hook shank, but I'm actually gonna, since those tips are a little bit wispy at the end, I'm gonna break a few of those off at the right length. So I'm actually gonna go about a full hook shank in length there, a little bit more than what I think I'll need. And then I'll mark that marabou and cut it at that point. And then tie that down. I want to keep the body fairly um, thin, fairly skinny. And then I'll just pinch off those tips. At the length I want it. I'll tie in the rib, which is the copper wire. And I'll take another bunch of the marabou. Same thing, just cut it off and cut those butt ends. If you've got really long marabou, you might be able to get by with putting in the tail and then wrapping the rest forward. But just to be on the safe side, I'm going to tie in some extra. I just cut off those very tips just to make it a little easier to tie in. And then I'll advance this forward to the front, tying down that wire and just bringing my thread forward. So now I'm going to take this marabou and twist it. And then I'm going to wrap it towards me. So then I can reverse rib and be able to tie that wire off a little easier. So if I wrap this in the opposite direction, the softer material is easier to tie off at the front here. Without losing control of it. And now I'll take the rib and go in the normal direction. Tie that down. Sorry for bumping the camera again. A few tight wraps. And break that loose. Now I'm going to come back to about here, and I'm going to take my pheasant tail and take four. I know I'm not making a spider, but I'm going to take four of these fibers and put them on one side for the legs. And the reason I do that is I want to end up with a little bit more for the wing case. And I don't think fish can count, so there's those on that side. I'll take four more. Again, I'm cutting off that curly stuff on the end just to save myself some heartache. And then tie those in on my side. Make sure they're the same length. And now I'll wrap those ends all the way to the eye. on top there and let them hang over the front. Now I'll take the dumbbell eyes. Tie them in. Looks like. Pretty well centered. Now I'm going to take a little bit more marabou just to clean up that area. Oops. Spin my thread. That's better. And now again, I'll use this to just kind of clean up this area. Come around in front of the eye, in between the eyes. Now I want my thread to end up right there where the legs are tied in. And I'm going to take the shell back and fold it over. Tie it in right there at the end of the head. And I'll just whip finish right over that spot. Now again, the wing case on these mature damsels will start to be more pronounced. So he leaves about a quarter of an inch of the butts sticking back past in between the legs there to represent that wing case. And that's Brian Chan's mature damsel nymph.
That looks fun to tie.
I enjoy this one. And then like a braided damsel nymph. As far as just fun to tie, but definitely that first one is the easiest. So this next fly is going to be Randall Kaufman's damsel nymph. Good friend of Brian Chan's, Phil Rowley. It's one of his favorite flies as well. Fairly easy to tie. Again, a 3X nymph hook. The thread just normally 8/0 or 70 denier will be fine with a color to complement whatever you're using for the body. The tail, body, and wing case is all marabou. And then it's also ribbed with a gold or copper wire. You can use a colored wire if you'd like. I don't really need to go to the materials because we're basically using some of the same stuff. So here's where we're going. Before we get to that, though, Brian Chan also has a baby damsel nymph. And like I was saying, if you catch it during the hatch where they rise up and swim in that 1 to 3 feet of the surface, they can be way out in the middle of a pond or a lake, and they'll just keep swimming toward shore in that 1 to 3 foot range So a lot of times, fish are going to be feeding all over the lake because these things are just all kind of herding towards shore to hatch, once the conditions are right. And
Mike,
so
Neil was asking what the take is like when it's close to the surface like that. Is it pretty aggressive?
I don't think I've ever had them like right close to the surface. Normally, uh, I don't weight these floating line and like I said, just a slow hand twist retrieve. And usually I'll see, um, I don't think it's a savage strike or anything like that. It's definitely, I've not seen it be splashy uh, takes. Um, Crappie in warm water really love these things. So do bass. Usually seems to be bigger bluegill when you're fishing these. Um, but if you catch it outside that window and you're not seeing um, the bent shucks on the shoreline and seeing any indication that they're swimming, the rest of the year, this is a baby damsel nymph. It's got a bead to weight it down. And this is what you could fish under an indicator, um, just above the weeds. If there's no weeds, just above the bottom, and let the wind and the waves just kind of move it along. Because, like I said, they do kind of search the weed edges and stuff, looking for those baby ones. But back to Randall Kaufman's marabou damsel. Again, a 3X hook. I'm still going to use this olive nano silk just because, like I said, that's what I have. It really helps to use that wax when you're using this slick thread. I just got this actually about a week ago, the wax, and that's been a game changer for getting the thread started and holding materials. I'll go ahead and put in eyes. I'm going to use some mono eyes here. You do those crisscross wraps and then follow it with these, I've heard them called yoke wraps, or even kind of like you're doing a parachute, is just to come around above the hook, and that'll cinch up those cross wraps that you did and really make that tight. And you don't have to use glue.
The default speaker was changed to something's been changed. So it's
So the Hoffman's,
We'll work with that.
again, just I'm going to go ahead and wet this again just to keep that under control. Oh, about a shank length. Tie this down. I can cut this out of the way before I cause too much of a mess. Same thing, if you have long enough marabou, this is another fly where you could tie in the tail and then just continue it forward. The problem is you have to have really long marabou because it's not only the tail and the body, but you'll see how that wing case is formed at the end. So it's better to just go ahead and, like I said, take another ½ inch or so of the marabou, tear it off, and then when I turn this around, I want to actually take those tips and square those off as well. It's just easier to work with a little bit thicker than to work with those real wispy tips. Tie that in nice and tight. I also need the wire. And you can see great minds think alike. A lot of these patterns are very similar with using the marabou for the body material. So I'm going to take those. I'm going to again wrap this way. Wrap it up the hook shank. And I think the best way to come through those eyes, see them go around this way. And then I want to tie this off in front of the eyes here, but not cut off those butts. I'm going to leave those butts intact, hanging over the eye there. Then rib the fly. And then it's going to be hard with nano silk, but I want to actually build up a little bit of a head here to force that marabou back. I think that should be good. Foot finish. And then just grab that marabou and tear it loose. It's better to tear it so you don't have even tips, but when it's wet, it's kind of hard to grip it. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and cut it. And that acts as the wing case. When it's wet, it just kind of folds back. And that's the Kaufman's marabou damsel. Now, again, you know, a real popular fly to a lot of people is a olive marabou or olive woolly bugger. And really, that's not too dissimilar from what we've been doing. I think a lot of times, especially a small olive woolly bugger is definitely a good imitation of a damsel nymph. But here's another one of my favorite. This is actually done pretty big, but I do fish them big, a little bit bigger than normal. That's probably like a 2-inch fly there, and it has a braided tail. So I'm going to at least do a tail and show you how I do it. So what I'll do is
You didn't want the recipe on that, Mike?
Yeah, go ahead and put that up.
Okay.
If there ends up being enough time, I'll go ahead and tie the whole fly.
Oh, he's got time. I want to see him tie that whole fly.
Okay. Let me start the thread. Oh, I'm sorry. Um, again, very similar, 3X long hook, um, mono eyes or bead chain you can use. The tail is actually braided marabou, um, and fine copper wire for the rib. Wing case and legs again are pheasant tail, and then it's just a thread head. So go back to the vise. So the first thing I'm going to do is form a thread base here. And then I'm going to take another piece of thread that I have here and just kind of double it over the hook. So the ends are about the same. This is about maybe a 4 or 5 inch piece of thread. And I'm just going to run that back to the end. So now I have two pieces of thread hanging out here. Now I'm going to take a goodly amount. I need a nice long marabou plume. So that one's got pretty long uh, fibers on it. So I'm going to take just a big clump of this, about probably almost an inch worth. Might have to take it off in separate clumps, but same thing, cut off those curly ends. And I'm going to tie this in. I got some broken ones there. I'm going to actually tie this in here at the butt because I want to keep those long. And I'll take just a little bit more. Tie that in as well. You can kind of strip at this ostrich or marabou just to kind of pull off some of those fibers at the base, and then it doesn't cause as much bulk when you tie it in. So I have that all tied in right there at the bend of the hook. And then I'm just actually going to come forward and whip finish this off. And remove it. And then I like to think of the best way to do this. I like to actually put the eye of the hook in the vise to kind of bring that tail end more towards me. I don't want to find my threads. Those are hanging out here to the side. Again, I want to moisten this quite a bit.
We're out of focus, Mike.
There we go. I had too much in the camera there and it got confused. So I want to split this apart into 3 separate sections. Okay, here's my thread. There's two. Take a little bit from each one to form a third. So now I've got this with a piece of thread and this with a piece of thread and then one in the middle. Now I'm going to take these electronic test clips, plunger style hackle pliers, some people call them. And I'm going to put those on these outside ones. And then I'm just going to go ahead and use the weight of those hackle pliers to help me just go through here and braid it one over the other. If you get good at this, you can do your granddaughter's hair. And so once you get that braided to about the length that you want, take one of these clips off and grab it at that point. And I'll remove this other one. Now I've got those two threads. I'm going to take those two threads and tie overhand knot. Whoa. And I should be able to let go with that. Moisten this again. Tie another overhand knot. Easier to do close to my body instead of reaching out around the camera like I'm doing, but once you get a few knots, there it goes. And that's fairly secure. You can cut the thread away. And as long as the thread matches in color, you don't have to worry about hitting those ends perfect. Now, just come over here with your thumb, grab it, and just tear that away. Now, when that dries, that's going to look nice. Now, if you take a little UV resin on that knot, that'll help it somewhat. But I always say the worst case scenario is that this will come unbraided. You know, the knot will come out and it'll come unbraided. And then you still have the same kind of a tail that a lot of these other flies have. It's still going to look, you know, skinny and straight in the water. But that
I love
braided
that
tail,
tail, Mike. Love that
What's
tail.
that braided tail is really, since it's braided like that and that marabou is so fine, it really does move in the water.
Mike, I do pretty much the same thing, except I use a pin to braid my marabou tails with, and then I just make about 6 or 8 of them and put them aside, and then just tie them onto to a hook.
Definitely could. And I've done that, done a few tails, you know, to where I have those all at the ready. And then like I'm doing here, just put the thread back on and continue with the fly. So I'll put think I have enough copper wire. I'll grab another piece. More marabou. You could use ostrich on this body as well. I saw a guy tie a very similar fly to this at a show in Salt Lake City, like, God, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. Probably closer to 30. Don't remember his name, don't remember what he called it. But I continued to do my best to recreate it, and it's kind of a fun one. I will put in a, normally how I do this is grab about 9 or 5, quite a few pheasant tail fibers. Get rid of those curly butts, and usually have to fiddle with this a little bit. I want my legs to come back about that far. So when I fold those back, I have to kind of think about what to do for the length. What I'll do, you know what? If you do a few of these in a row, you can kind of get like a pattern down, but if you haven't tied it in a while, I'll just go ahead and tie my legs in like that other pattern. About there. I'll leave that forward. Now what I'm going to do though is add a little bit of kind of some thickness up here and fold that back. I want the wing case to be back like that. Now that I got that on there, I will put on the eyes this time. Then again, take that marabou, crisscross it between the eyes a little bit, and then tie it off. Then I usually fold the wing case forward. I got a leg in there. And I like to tie a couple wraps behind the eye. And then move my thread to the front. Tie it in between the eyes. Come around in the back and fold it over again. It gives me a nice kind of a more like a thicker head there. And on my fishing flies, I just kind of leave that loose like that, but I'll go ahead and cut it about there. Finish. And that's another fun damsel.
I love that fly, Mike. Of all the ones you've done, that's my favorite.
I do like those.
I've caught a lot of crappie on that fly.
Yep, they can be a little bit of a pain. But once you've done a couple of those tails, you can crank them out pretty quickly. And you can do them pretty easy.
Like that. That really imitates that one.
Any questions for Mike? Well, that's it for Mike's presentation tonight, except he's coming right back on the weekly tip. He's going to be talking about weighting a fly. I'll talk about the second half a little bit later. But for now, let's get back to Mike.
A lot of you may do this already, but I know I wasted a lot of lead and then lead substitute wire when weighting the flies. What you'd see a lot of people do is take off a length and then hold it here and do their wraps. And then they'd end up breaking or cutting this end off. So what I started doing, and this was partly, I think, from a Tim Flagler method that he was doing. First, I'll just get some thread started on this. It's just a random hook here. Get some thread started. And then if I want to start this thread, and this is where, again, a real good strong thread really helps with this. This is that nano silk. I'm just going to go right over the very end of it and super tight, maybe come back, you know, maybe about 1/8 of an inch, and that should be enough to, it's not, give it a little bit further. And then that'll let me take this wire then and wrap it toward the back. What I really wanted to do is in front of my thread. So let me move my thread over there. So now, am I zoomed out enough? I can keep that lead on the spool. Again, this is lead-free wire. I can keep the wire on the spool and just go ahead and make my wraps against the thread like that. And then when I've made enough, I can take that thread, do some wraps around it, and bring it parallel to the hook shank. And then as I start to go back, if you take that wire and start kind of rocking it, it'll put a little tapered drop off there at the end of the wire.
Mike or Al, have you ever tried using the wire on a bobbin?
I have not done that, but that'd be another way to do this technique. If you had this on a bobbin, that'd be a lot easier than the way I was doing it. is to wrap it in front with the thread, chasing the thread, so that when you get to the end, the thread is hanging there and you can tie off that end. And then if you rock it back and forth as you're tying that down, there's a little slope right there at the end that it's not a sharp tip. So you're not ending up with little broken pieces, and you're not having to dull your scissors to cut it, or have another tool handy.
Yeah,
The other
Mike,
way,
I've been using a bobbin for years and found out it makes a big difference.
yeah, definitely would. I've used it for copper wire before. Um, but for lead, I'm sure that would really help.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't
also
think
with
I'm,
the
go
with
ahead.
the high strength GSPs, you
Yes,
can almost cut the lead. I've cut 0.15 lead with the GSP. Literally, you wrap it tight and you literally pinch it off. You can also do it with the flat if you're not careful. You know, the flat lead and a GSP, it's really easy to get cut right through it, like on
right.
the hens and stuff.
And for those of you that were at the FFI presentation where my camera was messed up, I did show this method. And it's using, this is lead. They don't make, I did look around a little bit and I wasn't able to find a lead-free zonker tape. But if you're familiar with the zonker fly, it uses this lead tape for an underbody,
Yeah.
and it's adhesive on one side. So what I did was I cut about a 2-inch 2-inch piece of it, and then cut it into strips, narrow strips like that. So then you just take that adhesive off the back, and I would have thread on my hook, but then you can just take that lead. Let me zoom in some. Well, actually, that'll probably be fine. You can take that lead and wrap it, and it'll stay put because of that adhesive. Wrap a layer. Say that's as far as I want to go, and then you can just tear that loose, and then come back to about maybe a turn and a half, or a turn and a half away from the end, and then put another layer. Break it loose, and then come in even further. And then by the time you put your thread over that, you've got a real nice tapered lead body. You can kind of burnish it with your thumbnail. This is a Davy McPhail thing here.
I don't know who, I don't care who came up with it. I like it, and it's going to go in my bag of tricks, and we'll credit both you and Davey on that. We've got some
Okay.
comments here too. Basically, we've got 3 or 4 people saying that they really like your flies, your materials, and the use of materials. And Neil is asking if you're using 50 denier nano.
Yes. It says 12-aught 50 denier.
Yeah. Okay.
Semper Fly.
What's the name of that lead, Mike?
It's the stuff that I don't remember where I bought this. This was from American Sports Supply, but
They're out
I
of
didn't get it
business.
from there.
Yeah, it's Zonker lead strip is what they're calling it now, John.
Right. This is called Zonker underbody lead tape. Comes in a pretty long piece, and I haven't tied zonkers in a while, but that's where you use these strips of fur for the back. That zonker tape kind of makes basically if you're not familiar with the zonker, you basically take a piece of this adhesive backed tape. You actually want it to be like a little shorter than the total of the hook of the shank. So right about like that. And fold it together so that it flings like that. And then take an old scissors that I've got a curved one that I use for this. Kind of helps to make the kind of a curved shape to it. Kind of hard to get that first part started. But then I like to make kind of a fatter front. Like that, and then come around
Used
and
to make
taper
those
it.
out. Used to make those out of old Pepsi cans.
That'd be another way to do it. And then you can mess with that all you want to kind of, make it a different shape.
Yeah, and then you slip the mylar tubing over it, and that makes a really good looking fishy type body.
Right. So here's a pearl mylar tubing. Comes with the string on the inside. And you just take a piece of that, cut it loose, and then pull that string out of the center.
I'll be darned. I didn't even know what we were doing back in the 70s when we were tying these.
Slide that over, and then you've got thread at the back. You tie that down, and then put on thread at the front and tie it down. I usually leave this frayed here at the end, and so you've got a little bit of that frayed at the end, and then the rabbit strip goes over the top of that for the body or wing or whatever you want to call it, tail. So that was a zonker tip after the damselflies, but so one other tip that and this comes from occasionally I'll tie a lot of little micro jigs, 80th of an ounce, 64th of an ounce, probably is about the biggest, for crappie and small trout jigs. And so I have these, I bought like a grab bag of rabbit skins, different colors. And if I want to grab a clump of this for a tail, I've got to grab what I think is the right length and just kind of make a cut there. And then I've got some that I cut that I didn't want to off on the sides of it. And by the time you pull it away, it's all uneven and messed up. So what I started doing is come around to the back side here and just cut a strip similar to a zonker strip. And that's what made me think of it. Cut a strip of it. And then if you want a tail section, you can come over here and say I want about that much for the tail. And then just cut that hide. And now you've got it all contained with the hide attached there. If you want to work that into a dubbing loop and then cut the hide off of it, that would work good. If you want to just use this as a tail, you can get it to where you have it all under control and in the shape you want. Cut that loose and then tie it onto the hook. That's all I've got.
Okay, well, super then. Now, we're going to move back into one little addition to the tip, and that's based on some emails and that I got this week. And we're going to talk about Google techniques, Google methods. This is all thanks to David Buckner. He has added to my ability to search. I'm actually dangerous now where I was only half dangerous before. But I think you all know how to search Google by typing or writing into the search bar. You can do it by voice, by asking for it, but I did not know until this week that you can do it by the lens of your camera or your cell phone. And in my case, you download an app called Google Lens, just like the lens of a camera. And let me get this thing turned on because I do want to show you how this works because it is really slick. I think you all know how to talk to Google and get a search or to type into the search bar. So I'm not going to go into that other than to share with you how I get to my app. And let me get over here to the materials area and I'll just get this out of the way. All right, let me get down a little bit closer. On my cell phone, let me get that thing to focus here. There it is. On my cell phone, I've got the search bar, and you can either type into that or speak into it. But then I downloaded this app right here, and that is to search by taking a picture of whatever it is you want. And that brings up a screen that looks like this, that you can, anyway, let me get back over here. It looks like this as it looks around the room. And in fact, as I look around the room, I think I got a camera back here behind the computer. Let me just tip this down so you can see. I'm going to come back here now and take a picture of this camera. And it added it to my search. Bring this back up. Cost $186 on Amazon. It's a Makos. Well, I mean, I already knew that. But what I'm trying to tell you is that I was able to make a search for that, or I can go out into the yard and take a picture of a piece of gardening equipment and know what to do with it. All of that just by taking a picture. So probably everybody here knew this except me, but go get the app. It's called Google Lens. But anyway,
Al, it's built in automatically to Androids. Androids automatically have it on your search bar to the right, at least on my Samsung. I just hit the lens function and then I can search and you can literally find almost anything you're looking for. Sometimes it's off, but it's usually pretty good.
Yeah, I've been just thoroughly amazed at some of the weird stuff that I walk around the kitchen and say, well, I wonder if I can find that. And so I'll give it a try. And yep, it's about 95%, I would say, has been my experience. But anyhow, if you already knew about that, well then great. I didn't bring anything to you. You did, what I found interesting is I've searched some flies, and I did our mystery fly, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. So I might as well get to the sharing section, and then we can just go right on into the mystery fly and all the other things. But let's. Okay, folks, it's now time on BT's Fly Tying Friday to share. That's where all of you share with all of us. And that's a mystery fly. I received one from Art San Ramon, and that was his version that he sent to me. Good job, Art. Appreciate it. I'm looking for flies from all of you out there, so please consider sending them to us. The group, and we can all just chat about whatever. And if there's nothing else, I'll do a wrap. But if you got some other things you want to share, let's do it.
I have something to share.
There you are.
Hi. This is the Christmas fly we tied last night. We had so much fun, but this ended up being the favorite. So you just use a hook and you put a whole bunch of stuff on there that you may or may not ever use, and then you tie it to your Christmas tree.
That's
Well,
cool.
looks really cool, Sherry. Thank you for sharing. Anything else?
That's it.
Well, that's it for tonight, folks. Thanks for joining us. For now, it's a wrap until next time. See you next week.